The Ministers of Trade and Industry in Africa will be meeting in Kinshasa in the DRC to discuss trade and investment on the continent in line with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. This meeting comes at a time where the world is grappling with a trade war after the United States imposed increased tariffs to many countries. And for more on this, we're now joined by SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. She joins us now in studio. Sophie, clearly China is not backing down here when it comes to these tariffs being imposed by the US. And just tomorrow we know that China will see that come into effect when it comes to that 125% tariffs imposed on the US.
Yes, you are correct, Mbali. The president of China, Xi Jinping, indicated that China will not be bullied. And currently, when you look at different media outlets and also on social media, you can see that Chinese institutions, including the diplomatic missions, are sending strong messages, quoting President Xi Jinping this morning in terms of what he said, and also indicating that China will not blink. And we've heard just a few hours ago that now America is saying President Donald Trump is waiting for President Xi Jinping to request a telephone engagement, and China is saying he is just not going to do that. If there were to be the negotiations, it will be done by people below him, and that would include people who are responsible for trade and investment, because that's how China operates. President Xi Jinping doesn't just talk or get engaged in public discourse unless there's something very serious. And therefore, I think now President Trump is beginning to feel the heat at home, because investors and big business in America, they are not happy at all, including the most trusted advisor, Elon Musk, as you saw, his company, Tesla, struggling in Europe and also in China. And therefore, he is really under pressure. We haven't had much of him except the message he posted earlier on, saying that the trade policy is well crafted, but secondly, he was issuing almost a threat to Russia that Russia must now be serious about the negotiations. As at this moment, we know that his envoy is in Russia, Moscow, where he met the president of Russia, that is Vladimir Putin, in relation to the war in Ukraine. And therefore, it is a difficult day for President Donald Trump today. We know that he has gone to a medical academy where he's receiving, or perhaps he's undergoing normal routine checkup. As you know that these high-profile people, the heads of state and government, they often go to military medical institutions just for checkup as part of the routine checkup. We are told he's doing that. We don't know when he is done with that. Perhaps we are going to see him and hear from him. But the reality is now it looks like America is waiting for that call, and it looks like it's not going to happen.
And Sophie, the EU seems to be engaged in ensuring that the country has more trade relations to navigate the trade war. What is the latest from the EU?
Well, we saw the leader of of Spain visiting China and having a meeting with President Xi Jinping. And we saw earlier on reports that both China and EU are going to meet in the coming days, where you'll have a high-powered delegation from the European Union engaging officials in Beijing. And therefore, you can see that there is no trust. There can't be trust. Even those who were friends of the United States of America, with President Trump being so transactional and unpredictable, you cannot trust the United States of America. Any leader at this moment is looking for alternative market and perhaps countries that can be reliable partners, the people you can trust, the people you can predict. But with President Trump, that trust is waning, and including in America. And therefore, we are seeing all these movements. We don't know how many countries are calling Beijing as we speak, who are affected, including countries on the continent. As you know, that there are strong ties between Africa and Beijing. When you look at the Africa-China agreement and summit that are often being held to strengthen trade and investment between China and Africa. And therefore, China is saying, we are not going to be bullied, and we are going to engage in negotiations. We are ready, and we must follow the normal route of trade negotiations as outlined by the World Trade Organization.
Let's turn our focus now to the African continent, and this meeting in Kinshasa is quite crucial and also presents an opportunity for Africa to unpack and have some common understanding on these tariffs. Are we likely to see a united force in response to the US, Sophie?
We've seen some countries on the continent, particularly small, poorer countries, already going to or pleading with America in terms of a begging bowl. And I don't think that there's going to be a united voice. But that meeting is quite crucial because it's better for these trade ministers to share information, and perhaps some of them will then look at how to approach this issue, taking into consideration other players. For example, there were reports about how Lesotho wants to go about the negotiations with America. We are trying to get reaction from the Minister of Trade and Industry or the Minister of Foreign Affairs to confirm those reports, because if the reports are true, it means those offers to the US are going to affect the region. For example, an issue that perhaps Lesotho will support will go to DRC to engage in assisting to stabilize DRC. SADC is pulling out, and you know that on the issues of military capability, the only strong countries are your Tanzania, South Africa, your Angola, and therefore I think that will be very dangerous, and therefore that's why it's important, particularly when you look at how the economy of African countries are linked. When you take, for an example, South Africa in the SADC region, is an anchor, and it extends to other regions as well. So whatever you do, you have to ensure that you don't create problems for the region. And that is why doing business on the continent, these African countries amongst themselves, in line with the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, is quite important right now. That implementation must happen, because the continent can survive. As we see, President Xi Jinping is going to tour Asia, he's going to Vietnam, he's going to Cambodia, he's going to Malaysia, to ensure that the trade relations in Asia, between Asia and China, are very strong.
All right, Sophie, thank you so much for that update. That's Sophie Mokoena, International News Editor. They're giving us that insight in terms of the trade wars we are seeing between the US and China.